I'm Laura Oliphant. I'm 25 years in communications, and I've worked with founders of startups, scale-ups, large corporates, charities, and directly with government. So a broad client base. Stand has been going for 12 years. And I thought I'd start with our positioning, because actually that's where any company should start. How can you, if you were not even stuck in an elevator, going up a few floors, how could you explain what your business is and why you come to work every day and why that person in the lift with you should matter? So ours is pretty simple. You'd expect that of a communications company. We build brand belief for trailblazers. We've changed that a little bit over the last few years. We've always sort of built belief or built brands or brands that believe in better. But I think belief is the most important thing right now. And actually being a trailblazer is really important. So a little bit about why we think that matters and why I think you should care as founders. So it's not enough for people to know your brand. Know your brand anymore. They need to understand the why behind it, what you stand for, and why they should sort of care about you and why they should support you. And it's not always just about investment. I mean, that is a big thing for startups, but it's actually why should they pick your brand? In a lot of cases with early stage companies, why they should partner with you, because it's really important if you can find a partner that can help you get into a market quickly and cost effectively. So we're a team of communications experts. I've been doing this for a long time. What they're an expert in has morphed. We now have as many digital experts as we have media experts. It's very difficult to kind of stand out. So you have people that come from a range of different backgrounds. But I suppose the common thing amongst all of them is they find communications their passion and joy. And what tools they use to do that is what's changed over time. So we launched 12 years ago by accident. I'd already co-founded an agency and swore never to do it again. But I was doing some work with a branding agency, and they were creating the branding for one of the new challenger banks. They went bust, and I had got the launch of a bank sort of part way through, and they were as good as their sort of positioning, which is supporting SMEs, and said, if you can set up and have a website and an office in 2 weeks, we'll come with you and we'll give you 3 months, to support us, which was the most amazing sort of vote of confidence from them. And I remain ever grateful to them. But actually, it led to so many other opportunities because they were private equity backed. There were a lot of portfolios in that company, and that was our foothold in finance, which continues to be, a core of what we do. We're also experts in sort of health sustainability, like who isn't in sustainability, but that has changed over time. Building communities, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and sort of lots in between, from care to disability to internet safety and education, sort of in young people in the broadest sense. We're a B Corp. That's something I can talk to you about if that is something that you've considered. And we've always vowed, and Trailblazer is just what ChatGPT led us to this time round when we'd run out of descriptors. But we've always worked with people that are disrupting markets, challenging the status quo, raising the bar, like bringing something new, which is why I think I gravitate towards kind of founder communities, because that's what everybody is doing, sort of trying to bring something different. And we do that really with behavior change. So we don't focus just on, what's the head saying to make someone support a brand. It's actually what their heart is feeling. And it is about kind of those two things, because it's very easy to build loyalty if you have hearts and minds on your side. So we work as a strategic partner. That's why we don't call ourselves an agency or a consultancy or any other term that sort of comms businesses tend to use. And that is because we don't see it as a supplier relationship. We often get brought in at really early stage on business challenges. I've been asked whether a bank should pay an interest rate of 2% or 2.2, what might stand out more. It's not a financial question, it's what will make people move for that interest rate. And it's about helping clients to cut through the noise and meaningfully connect with people. We do everything from insight and strategy to helping companies build their internal culture. That's something that's grown as a piece of our work really since COVID, I would say. It is a completely different ballgame, keeping your staff happy. Now, it used to be a combination of kind of a nice place to work, keeping up with competitors in terms of pay. Now it's a lot more complex than that. And so is connecting with customers, so they believe and invested in what you do and why you're doing it. And hence taking brands from awareness to belief and translating that belief into value. And I think that's something that matters to founders more than most. So tools I've mentioned, insight, what's the task, what's the opportunity, strategy, how are you going to stand out, how will what you say sound different or look different, culture to boost performance and develop strong communities inside and out. And then just content, that's the core of what we do really. How you build authority relationships and connections through everything from press office to digital to sort of stakeholder campaigns, which in an election year is a sort of a challenge in itself. So, why should you care? And I need to just minimize you, otherwise I keep losing part of my slides and I don't know them all off by heart. So yeah, that is better.
We can't see the slides.
Oh, right, have they gone? Sorry. My talent isn't in technology, which is what you'll work out. I never drive a slide deck in a presentation. There's probably a good reason for that. So so you can't see what's on there. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Right. I just need to get you off my screen so I can see my slides. Don't worry, I'll make up the rest. That's on the right-hand side. So you should care because, as you'll all know, lives are getting busier. We're living with information overload. Global events are more challenging than ever, and almost half of the world this year has elections. The way you sum it up is really the only constant is it's all changing. And if you want to stand out to customers, employees, or investors, it's getting harder than ever. And clear and effective communications really is the essential thing to business success, because it's how you build relationships that cut through the noise. So some stats I found of why it is so tough. 5.5 million SMEs in the UK in 2023, 900,000 of those are startups. Over 50% say the availability of funding is holding them back, and 80% of customers want a company whose values align with their own, but they need to know what those values are. We carried out a survey of our own last year to inform our repositioning, and we asked some sort of big questions to 2,000 SMEs. What keeps you awake at night? What is your number one worry? And I think what was interesting is just how that shift goes from startup to scale up, and how as companies get bigger, almost the worries around sort of talent and standing out get bigger. And I suppose it's because they're sort of competing on a bigger stage, and that really it went from, there was some kind of great iterations from like cash flow to culture, and from all of the challenges of setting up to kind of standing out. So just a few stats: 64% say retaining talent and boosting performance is a primary worry. It rises to 70% for larger businesses. Hence why my talk of culture being more and more important, and how it's a different ball game. That is what a kind of positive culture can do for you. 62% worry about distinguishing their offer. That rises to 76% for larger companies. 57% worry about understanding customer motivations. It rises to 69% for larger businesses. This real sense that you lose touch with the customer the bigger you get. And the big thing that they brought out is kind of failure and how that can hold them back. And it's stark reality. You know, I just did a quick Google when I was writing these slides, but the expectation is 30,000 companies will fail this year. And I think the constant stream through all of those questions, and we didn't ask those questions in a way that communication should be the number one thing, but a lot of those challenges can be solved or at least helped by effective communication. And so when I was putting the presentation together, I was like, there's a lot of these 5 tips, but that only really works when your audience is from the kind of same business area. And I think the challenge with talking to a group like this is I don't know anything about your companies, but I suspect they're very different. That is the beauty of a kind of a community like this. So I decided the best way of probably handling it is like to ask you, do these figures resonate, and what do you worry about? And, you know, in terms of communication, what do you think you need help with? And, you know, do you think it's holding you back? So, you know, is it a worry for you? It might not be a worry at all. And I guess your chance to sort of ask me anything and let the discussion go from there. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Laura. Laura brought up some very personal points there. Any questions from anyone? Andrew.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for that. That was very interesting and useful data points. I had a question more about how you grew your business. So if I heard you correctly, it sounds like you started this on your own, but then you turned that into a small, you've now got a team of people. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was in an agency on my own. I literally was brought in for a couple of days a week to see whether they were based in Abu Dhabi, and they had a small UK office. And they wondered whether they should invest in the UK. So this was 2011. And they just happened to be doing the branding for a bank called Shawbrook, which most people will have heard of now. But this is at the time when Aldermore and Metro, there were 3 challenger banks kind of all coming forward at the same time to break up, you know, the dominance of the high street, which unfortunately still exists. So I was on my own. I brought in 2 people that had worked with me previously, literally on a part-time basis, to help launch this bank. But it shows how things have changed, because I was sitting in a meeting really just looking at their branding from a comms point of view. And I was saying, you know, who's launching this bank? And they were like, we're not going to launch it. You know, who needs another bank in a financial crisis? We've got a broker model. We'll just tell our brokers what our deals are for lending. And I said, well, that makes sense for lending, but how are you going to get customers to give you deposits? You know, it was a different world entirely with interest rates back then. And they're like, oh, we'll just pay the top interest rate. But I was like, that's a really expensive way to acquire customers. So that's how I got involved in their communication. And famous last words, I said, it won't make a big splash. Like, it's a brand launch, it's a bank launch, and they're on BBC News. That is how much of a big deal it was, because lending for small businesses, which I guess is why it's relevant for this group, was so tough that £250,000 of new lending in 2011 made BBC Breakfast. And, you know, I think that's why I say the only constant in communication and in business is change. So yes, they literally disappeared overnight. Easter 2012, I was in Mexico on holiday, rubbish internet. I had the two people that were kind of working with me who I had heard literally because I wasn't going to get paid. And I went straight to, as any good entrepreneur does, what's going to happen with the client we're working with. So I thankfully had a limited company because I'd been freelancing and consulting for sort of 18 months. And the two people I was working with, I was just like, you know, have you got the appetite to do it? So while I was on holiday and they were juggling kids and other jobs, we came up with a name, we bought a URL, we set up a website, and in those days, a Twitter account. And, you know, gave it our all for that 3 months. And thankfully, I had enough money from consulting. I'd kept it in a separate account to pay these people literally probably living wage for a couple of months. And the bank gave us 3 months, and they were paying quite a lot. It was a big account. So yeah, that's how we started. I've now got a team of 20 people. I won't lie, it's been since Brexit, the most challenging work environment I've ever had. And that involves, you know, building an agency to 9 million and 120 people up until 2010. And that world events just make having a business difficult, and, you know, communications just gets more and more challenging as more platforms, as more information availability comes to people. So, but I've got a lot of people that are kind of business starters who I listen to, and, you know, they've advised me, like, just don't worry as much. It is a roller coaster, and that is the emoji I use most when I talk about, you know, my experience as a founder. And just know that when you go to the bottom, you come back up again. You know, we've 12 years, we've kind of teetered around, you know, 12 people and, you know, around 2 million income. And, you know, for every client that we kind of lose, 2 more doors open. And we never lose them because we don't do a good job. We lose them because they're investor backed, or their market's tough, or they just outgrow us and need a global agency that we can't compete with. And I've stopped, you know, bleating about that not being fair. That is just what happens when a company gets to scale. You know, they need something different.
That's great. Awesome.
Thanks, Andrew.
Laura.
Yeah.
Laura, may I ask a 2 questions in one, if I may? Sorry,
yeah.
Apologies. I was a little late into the call. Just 2 things really. Which sector do you think you're most aligned with? And the second part really is, when you talk about communication, what is it you actually do? You know, the word communication means a lot of things. But, you know, what is it you actually, you know, do for a company? Are you a PR company? Are you advisors? You know, what is it? You know.
Oh, so sorry, your first question, you froze a little bit, is what sector are we known in?
Yeah. What sector of industry do you align yourselves with the most? You know, where are your sort of expertise aligned, or is it any?
It's not any, but it's more than one, which is a deliberate move to not be the victim of a sector that goes through a bad time. So if we had chosen to specialize in one of our core sectors, which is sustainability and renewables, we would have had a really tough year, because the transition is stalling. The finance behind it's getting better, but we ran a round table a couple of weeks ago, and elections are a disaster. If the climate, the big soundbite that we've used in our material is that if it's a climate election, the climate suffers, you know, it's not a vote winner. It's like there's so much divide. So I would say there are 4 areas we are well known in: finance, sustainability, health and education. But they are very broad sectors because we also, one of our biggest clients is in care and living, older people living, we've got disability, but that is just a very broad approach to kind of health, everything from care to new areas, fascinating areas of health data, data sharing, AI. You know, what we've done in health traditionally is public awareness campaigns. Now it's getting people comfortable with machine learning and AI for diagnostics, for you know, creating sort of cures, and people are very uncomfortable with that. And in terms of what we do, I am deliberately vague because it depends what the task is. If you're in one market now in communications, it will be very hard to operate. So we came from PR roots, but social and digital has grown massively because it's even harder to get in the media. But we equally do, you know, investor decks, so advise people on making their offer look attractive, you know, from crowdfunding right through to institutional investors. So communications, I think, is just a common term for helping you talk to somebody in whatever form that is and whoever that is. And that changes depending on the life cycle of a business or a brand. And, you know, the year, it's really impossible to do any public affairs or any sort of political influencing this year. So you've got to get to other people in order to change kind of government policy. So yeah, it's constantly shifting, but a deliberate decision I made after my first agency shrunk massively when there was a change in government. It was a public sector specialist. We ran some of the biggest public sector campaigns, government campaigns, and it shrunk overnight when there was a change of government and all of those campaigns stopped. So it was a deliberate decision not to specialise in A, any market, and B, any bit of communications, because all it does is shrink your pool of potential clients.
Sorry, one last question. Do you also assist with funding sources, or is that not your area of expertise?
No, I mean, we, even if it's crowdfunding, we'll be working with one of the crowdfunding companies. But you know, I've worked with a lot of investment banks and public private equity VCs, so I kind of know that world, but no, I'm not an introducer in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Andre. Dan.
Yes, my main questions. Hi, Dan. Very good to speak to you, by the way. I really enjoyed that. So I run a customer experience consultancy business, but as it's just me, I don't have a huge team. I have an accountant and a few other people, associates, that kind of help ad hoc and things, but primarily it is just me. So I'm a big fan of Richard Branson, and I like the Virgin brand. I always did growing up, but Virgin was very much about Virgin and also Richard Branson. When people use my services, they don't just use DAP consultancy, they generally use me as a person. So when I do my communications, my posts, my marketing, my website, what tips would you recommend on getting that balance right between advertising and communicating me and also DAP consultancy? Can they become one, or have they got to be separate? And is it ratio of 70% business, 30% me? How would you kind of, any tips on that? And again, that question is probably applicable to any solo entrepreneurs out there, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of both. Don't separate them out, because it's really hard to build a following, you know, online, or profile and having a voice for one, let alone, you know, for two brands. So you are your brand. The first thing you've done, which I think is sensible, is it's not your name. It might be your initials, but it's not your name. And that is a mistake I think sometimes startups do, you know, and then it's really difficult to scale from something that has your name on the door. So I would say you are the reason that people will come to you, but you won't necessarily be the reason that people stay with you. So I don't be ashamed of kind of talking as you for a reason for people to want to talk to you and listen to your expertise. But once you get them in and once you get them in the funnel, it's really important that it doesn't sound like a one-man band, because, you know, then your point at which our pain point is when they want a global agency. But that's like 3 or 4 years down the line in a lot of our cases of our clients. With you, your pain point will come very soon if they have only got you to work with. And so the associates, the kind of access to other agencies, to be an introducer to experts in other areas is your key, I think. And I think it's perfectly okay to talk about associates and partner agencies, and, you know, and your power is in that you know the good ones and can get them, broker those deals. But yeah, that is the point I would say. Get them in with your name, but once they're in, they need to be invested in the consultancy and in your network of other partners.
Cool, I appreciate that, and that's and I've tried to do that. I've said like we on my website, we that consultant. I said our partners at blah blah blah. But there again, yeah, it's very clear that it is just me at the same time. So yeah, great advice. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And like you said, scalable, because ultimately I do want to employ a team and grow out, and so I want to make it future proof as well. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, I mean, the bit of advice I would give you, and it applies to everyone and the brands that we work with, the key is to punch above your weight. And that's why I get really frustrated when we get brought in as a supplier towards the end of a journey, because it's like good communications can help you punch above your weight. And, you know, perception is reality. It will help you grow. And then you'll just grow, your ambitions will grow at the same state, you know, the same size as you as a business. But the big mistake is like, and I talked about this a lot during the pandemic, and I'm talking about it now in a time of kind of great change. You've got like two chances with or two options with communication. You can kind of hide under the table and hope that, you know, it passes, or you can communicate your way out. And it's fine to take cover if it's like a short burst of kind of a short challenge. But, you know, if that continues as it has really on global events since Brexit, you've been, you know, you can't have hidden under that table for that long. You literally have to kind of find a way out. And, you know, I'm not immune to that. My business has been as challenging over that time as any other founder, but we just find a way of like, you know, being a bit like reinventing ourselves and being able to tackle the problem that's right in front of people right now, which is why I'm finding we're doing more and more, you know, investor work, donor work, because challenges for charities are exactly the same as companies. They're finding it incredibly difficult to get donations, and that's even some of the most famous charities like the RSPCA has had to do a total reposition because people just aren't leaving their houses to cats anymore. You know, so that now they're like livestock and animal welfare more generally. So yeah, I've got millions of examples of kind of brands that, you know, will survive because they move with the times rather than kind of taking shelter and hoping it will pass.
Thanks, Dan. Martin.
Hi, Laura. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You mentioned in your intro about doing crowdfunding.
And
I'm working with somebody who's sort of embarked on a crowdfunding campaign. I'm always interested when people have done it to sort of be like, well, what advice would you give, or what do you kind of go, oh God, they've done that again? Like, what's the thing that people should avoid, and what's the thing that people should do that they don't do? What would be your advice?
My advice, and you might not necessarily agree, but the client that I worked with on their crowdfunding was another bank, and the chief exec of that bank said, "You're the second person I'm calling about this, because I believe that 60% of crowdfunding success is PR." You know, and so I think my biggest bit of advice when you're positioning your offer is don't talk about it as an investment in a traditional sense, i.e. it's going to make you money, because the health warnings on crowdfunding are big and scary, and I think they present themselves as a risk more than, you know, an opportunity, and that's because they have to. You know, there is no guarantees, and I know there's no guarantees in investment generally, but there are safer ways to invest your money. So I say that the biggest bit of advice is try and get people to support you and give you money because they believe in what you're doing and the kind of movement and the change that you're creating. So don't make it about you. Make it about whether you're trying to get people on electric bikes or you're trying to get people to take regular blood tests. You know, think of the Zoes and the Thrives. You know, I think if you talk about you, I think it's quite hard to persuade people to give you more than, you know, small amounts of money. But if you want to smash your crowdfunding target, which we did, you know, we were only going for 1 million and got 2. It's about, like, give me your money to help me do this thing that will benefit everybody. And that my frustration is when that's not considered, and it's like, oh, can you write a press release to promote our crowdfunding? No, because it's not news. The only news is maybe you smash your target. But can you generate interest in why you're raising money and what you're going to change as a result of that? Then you can. So it's the story in the narrative.
Martin, just to let you know, I've also been through a crowdfunding round with a company that I won't mention. But my experience for your information was how time consuming it really, really is. I mean, but you've got to also be prepared, as Laura quite rightly says, to spend money on your PR campaign and your marketing campaign to get your crowdfunding opportunity out there. The only other thing that I think is important to understand is when I went through my crowdfunding round, which I actually didn't take in the end, but I did raise the money that I wanted to raise after a lot of very, very, very hard work, a lot of money spent, and it took me about, you know, the whole process was between six months and a year. The one thing that I got out of it was I got 450 investors investing and actually submitting their funds into the crowdfunding platform. But the one thing that always resonates with me is I spoke to one investor who wanted to invest a lot of money into our business, but he turned around and said, I won't invest in this if you've got 450 people investing into your business and you've got 450 investors who are putting in £50 here or £100 here. And that's when I decided to call it quits on that, because, you know, if you've got all of those people on your cap table, it could actually create an issue for you later down the line. But each to their own. You know, it works for some, it doesn't work for others. But I had to take that sort of opportunity there and then to say yes or no. I don't know what you think, Laura.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I see crowdfunding as like the start of the investment journey often, because if you can pull together a budget to kind of PR it, and you can do that. In my crowdfunding experience in both times hasn't been that long. It's been like a short burst to kind of raise 1 million, 2 million. But that was quite an established sort of brand that already had a customer base. But I think it helps you get money together that you can then put into more communications and more investor work. So it's not seed funding, because that's a different thing. But I feel it can help when literally you are begging kind of Peter to pay Paul, and just to get that cash to, you know, help you get in front of other people. But, you know, if you work with a specialist, and there's only about 2 of them, you go around in circles and still end up at Crowdcube or Cedars. You know, they will help run it in a really efficient way, or help, you know, if you've got everything together, it's about having a strong proposition. But yeah, it just opens doors to other people. And then I think it's what you do with that community of 400 or 3,000 to then be advocates and sort of champions for your brand. So it makes it much easier to attract more people. But you know, it comes down to kind of what you're selling as an offer, because some people will be trying to raise money where there is not a kind of bigger picture to it. And I think crowdfunding fits when there's a bigger picture. So I've seen a lot in sustainability around kind of innovation and you know, new ways of generating energy or transport, and there's a much bigger picture to that.